Hello, hello. So my name is Sophie Buchaillard, and there are three things you need to know about me. I'm a migrant, I love the sound of birds, and I hate labels. I live the other side of the barrage in Penarth, the head of the bear in Welsh. And before that, I lived in Cardiff. I lived in a flat in Roath. I lived in a shared house in Cabaret. And I lived on a park bench in Butte Park. I came to Wales in 2001, 3 days after September the 11th. Before Wales, I lived in a raft of other countries. And wherever I went, I always listened for birds as a way to anchor myself. So when I moved to Penarth, I looked for birds, and boy, there's a lot of birds in Penarth. There's robins, there's woodpeckers, there's seagulls. But most of all, there are a lot of jackdaws. 40, 50 of them live across the road from me. They're fascinating birds, jackdaws. Did you know that in the 15th century, they were just called daws, no jack? The prefix jack was added later by an ornithologist eager to classify with great accuracy. Jack means small. Later, they were renamed again as European jackdaws, Western jackdaws, and Eurasian jackdaws. The thing I love about them is that there are some resident jackdaws, they stay put all year round. There's some migrant jackdaws, they travel all the way to North Africa or Russia and then they come back, depending on the season and the availability of food. And there's some vagrant jackdaws, they just wander around. There's an estimated 46 million jackdaws in Europe alone. And I read that in the UK, their numbers have increased dramatically since the 70s after people stopped killing them for being pests. They're monogamous, yet they live in large flocks and practice food sharing. And get that, a jackdaw will give his favorite food to another jackdaw, never the scraps. I don't know if you've heard them sing, it's not pretty. But they do this amazing thing. Every night, the flock by my house takes to the air and they chat, 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 chat for about 5 minutes. They circle around the houses and then they settle in the trees and go to bed. So if you can imagine, if you're a Hitchcock fan, 40, 50 birds taking to the air like clockwork every night. Dark mass taking to the air can be frightening. So I looked it up, and in fact, what they do is make as much racket as they can, and when the sound reaches a particular decibel level, they know it's time to migrate. They're birds who can vote, and their society is led by the needs of the many. Except they don't all go. The resident jackdaws stick around all winter, and the vagrant, well, they just wander. Vagrancy exists amongst humans too, of course. In French, it's called vagabondage. And in the 60s, there was a certain romantic flair about that sort of lifestyle. Romantic, as long as you were a man. If you were a woman, then you were sectioned in a mental health hospital. So writers like the French Colette and the Swiss explorer Isabelle Ebrard turned to fiction to talk about the chosen vagabondage so as not to be locked up. And so there are few stories of women who choose to leave their families behind to wander. And I've always found that frustrating because I grew up listening to stories of women in movement. My grandmother wore this trousers-wearing, poker-playing petite woman born in Vietnam who regularly traveled 12 hours late in her 80s years old to visit her friends. My mother, who's in her 80s now, just returned from 2 weeks in Uzbekistan. She was born in North Africa, and she has lived on 4 of the 5 continents. I warned you at the start, I'm a migrant, and you can hear it when I speak. Or maybe more accurately, I'm a vagrant who wandered from country to country for a while and settled in South Wales, almost by accident. I'm also part of this formidable family, none of whom were born in France, apart from me, for hundreds of years. Yet French is what you hear. I used to think it meant I belonged everywhere, a sort of citizen of the world, as Stephen Zweig called it. But in the current climate, it often feels more like I don't belong anywhere at all. And it got me thinking about the doors. You see, no matter the label, Jack, Eurasian, Western, the doe is the same bird wherever she is. What defines her is a series of choices, whether to be resident, migrant, or vagrant, where to go, whether to come back, all of the above maybe. But then what's her identity? Is it a particular geographical area? Or is she the embodiment of all the places the does which came before have traveled to and from? The places that make her want to take flight, sing, and decide whether to stay or go. I'm Sophie Buchaillard. I'm a novelist, a wanderer, a jackdaw maybe. I still hate labels. Assimilation is a story about family, migration, and belonging set in Wales and many other places. Like me, the novel is a mosaic and a journey. It's asking, what do you see? And I'll read you an extract. Of this journey, I retain a single postcard pressed between two blank pages of my travel journal. A blue sky framed by a red rock arch, memento of an excursion I took with my father to the Nevada Proving Grounds, 65 miles northwest of Las Vegas. A place where in 1951 the US dropped nuclear bomb to test their effects. The ground oozed with green and pink foam, as if a child had colored it in. At one point, we parked and my father stepped out of the car to take pictures. Shortly after, a large GM pickup truck with private security written in white lettering on the side reached us. A uniformed man stepped out with short cropped hair and the demeanor of an army personnel. As he approached, I noticed the tension in his hand, hovering over his sidearm. "Can I ask what you're doing, sir?" he asked my father, putting a heavy emphasis on the sir. Seemingly unfazed, my father replied that we were tourists holidaying along the national parks, that we had lost our way and would welcome his assistance. Hearing this, the armed man eyed the rental sticker on our car, motioned for me to lower the window, and addressed me directly, cricking his neck so he could make eye contact. "Is your father nice?" he asked. Peculiar question, heavy with meaning. I nodded yes, which seemed to satisfy his professional suspicion. Releasing the tension in his hand, he directed my father to approach. "This is a restricted area, sir," he explained in a gentler voice. "You can't be here." "Apologies," my father replied. "I lost my bearings." The security guard took another look at me and invited my father to re-enter the vehicle. "Follow me," he said. "I'll return you to the main road." In a car, I stared at my father as he drove at pace, following the man in an enormous van. "Were we really lost?" I asked once the guard had waved us off. He placed one finger against his lips and said, "Sometimes it's better to let people think you're lost," and smiled. Thank you.